Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I am your host, Alan Moore, and I'm excited to have XYPN member Raquel Hinman on the show today. Raquel has spent her entire career in financial services, starting out on the broker side before slowly making her way to the advisor side of the industry. She worked in a variety of different firms, which gave her a great perspective on the industry and the type of work she wanted to be doing. After working at a firm that specialized in high-income executives and another that specialized in inheritors, she ultimately launched her own RIA 3.5 years ago. She has grown quickly and just hired a part-time paraplanner and would like to add additional advisors to her practice. One of the things we talked about is that she's going through a divorce, and she made the point that she's been successful despite her spouse not being fully on board with her starting a business. She certainly has a lot going on, but is absolutely crushing it. And her success is a testament to her grit and determination to succeed. Did you know that 72% of callers who reach an automated answer will hang up without leaving a message and often call another advisor? A missed call can cost you a new client or chance to grow wallet share with existing ones. That's why finance professionals rely on Ruby's live receptionist to answer calls, transfer only the calls they want, take messages, collect new client intake, make follow-up calls, and more, allowing them to accomplish more and grow. Let Ruby help you increase productivity and give outstanding client service with every call. For a special offer, visit callruby.com/XYPN and use promo code XYPN, or better yet, call them at 844-853-7829. You can find any of the additional resources that we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/150. Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN Radio listeners. It's the community of advisors we've all been looking for that's there to provide support when we need it the most. Best of all, it's free. I encourage you to check it out. Again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Without further ado, here's my interview with Raquel. Hey, Raquel, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being on.
Thank you.
So I'm excited. You are another of Dan Andrews' recommendations for the podcast. So for anyone who wants to be on the podcast, make friends with Dan because he always sends me recommendations and I think I always take them. So I'm excited to hear about your story and just sort of the path you've taken to firm ownership. So for listeners' benefit, can you give sort of an overview of the practice, where you're located, type of client you work with, how many clients you have? And then we'll sort of go through career history and the details from there.
Sure. Okay. So I started my firm in January 2015. So it's been, almost 3.5 years. And I'm located in a town called Erie, Colorado, which is just outside of Boulder, and kind of a bedroom community suburb outside of Boulder. And I have 50 clients at this point in time. And I think I'm at about 180,000 in revenues. So I've had nice growth in the firm.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So 180,000, is that run rate? I mean, just based on where your clients are today, that's what you'll make in the next 12 months without any additional clients?
Yeah, that's kind of a 12-month annualized looking forward number.
Okay. All right. So fantastic. Well, talk to me about sort of your career path. I mean, has financial planning always been, I guess, vision for what you want to do with your career?
Yes and no. I was a finance major at CU, University of Colorado, and graduated in 1992. And so I've always worked in the industry. Originally, I wasn't planning on being an advisor. I worked on kind of the institutional side of the business for a long time. And I met the guy who was my husband, and he lived in Boulder and was a bike racer in Boulder. And so I knew I would have to move to Boulder if we were going to work out. And when you look at finance jobs in Boulder, you basically had to be an advisor. So at that point, I started studying for the CFP, and that's kind of when everything started.
So that was early 90s that you were studying for the CFP?
Yeah, I got my CFP in 1998. So I've been doing this for a really long time.
All right, fantastic. I wonder how many, like what order you were for women getting the CFP, because I feel like you were very early at that stage.
I know my CFP board number is pretty low, so I was one of the earlier ones. But yeah.
If it's in the three or four digits, then you know it's low because those are in order. So
yeah, I'm not quite that low, but I'm down there.
Yeah, so it is a good point that, finance jobs tend to hang out in the bigger markets, so especially then, but even today, like if you were a finance major headed to Boulder, like you're not going to find a lot of corporate finance jobs. It's not out there. So did you really know what financial planning was when you got into it? Or was it just sort of this is the job that I'm going to have and I'll go for it?
Yeah, I had an idea. So my first job out of college, I worked for a service center for Merrill Lynch. And I was literally in a call center with the headphones on 8 hours a day. And I was talking with brokers and their assistants and helping them with their clients. And, so no, that's not financial planning, but I got an idea of what an advisor is at least. And then I did that for about a year. And then I ended up moving to a firm called Portfolio Management Consultants, which is now part of Envestnet. And so I worked there, and when I was working there, I was in account management. So I would talk to financial planners and advisors all day long and helping them. We were like a third-party TAMP type of program. And so I would help these advisors figure out what to do with their clients' money. And back then, I used to talk to all these advisors, and I would ask them, I say, how did you build your business? What did you do? And what's it like? And they loved to talk about what they did and how they built their businesses. So it was really fun, and I learned a lot from them.
When you talked about a call center for 8 hours a day, like that's just what I imagine purgatory is.
Oh, it was awful. I still hate talking on the phone.
So that just ruined you, or you hated it before then?
No, after that, I hate talking on the phone.
It's so funny.
Email.
Yep. Yeah. I'm an email guy too. I can always tell when I'm going to get along with a vendor or someone who they're like, if the first thing is let's schedule a call, I'm like, no. How about you email me? We'll email back and forth 100 times, and then maybe I'll get on the phone with you.
Yes. I'll email, I'll web chat. I don't talk to my mom very much. I don't talk to my dad very much. I don't like to talk on the phone.
So that was still in Boulder. So I guess what was the next sort of career step for you from there?
Yeah. So I was actually in Denver. I mean, one thing is Denver and Boulder are an hour away from each other. So it was a commute. And, when I was at Portfolio Management Consultants, that's when I started studying for my CFP, because my husband and I were getting more serious. And, at the time I was living in Denver, he was living in Boulder. And, it was one of these things, if our relationship was going to work, I was going to have to move to Boulder. And so I started studying for my CFP there. And thankfully they paid for it, which was really nice. And I passed the test right at the same time I got married, because I remember taking the test and thinking, I have to pass this because I'd just gotten engaged and I knew I wasn't going to have time to study again if I failed.
That is good incentive.
Yeah. So and it was right when Princess Diana died, because I remember it was a weekend before the test, and I spent the whole weekend paying attention to the tabloid reports instead of studying, and I was really worried, but I passed. Anyway, that's how long ago it was. But so I passed, and then I actually went back to work for Merrill Lynch again as a broker. I had gotten to know somebody when I was studying for the CFP who had connections to Merrill Lynch. And so I went back and I worked as a broker at Merrill Lynch then for a few years. And that's actually where I stayed when I had my kids, which, I will say for women, if you're going to have kids, it's not necessarily a bad thing to be at those big brokerage houses, because they have great benefits. And I had paid maternity leave and things like that. So
yeah, it's a good point. I mean, and we've had some folks on that, had babies after starting a firm, which is absolutely doable, but it's a rocky road. There's no question about having actual maternity leave that's paid with paid health insurance is a blessing.
Yeah. Well, and back then, I mean, they didn't have things like the XY network. So people weren't just going off and starting their own firms. And that was something I didn't even know was possible back then.
Right.
So
that's a good point. So then, and I guess that was back in the day when they actually still supported the CFP. I don't think you're allowed to have the CFP there anymore as a broker, but I'm not sure if that's currently true. It sort of goes back and forth, but
yeah, when I got hired, I know somebody got a $10,000 bonus for hiring me because they had a CFP.
Wow.
Yeah. And actually, when I left, at the time I left, they were requiring all of their brokers to get a CFP within 2 years.
Yeah, that was back in the day.
Okay. Things have changed.
I do think it's, and again, I don't know, every company is a little different on this. I mean, some are denying it just because the fiduciary requirements of the CFP is and compensation disclosures and all of that. Like, it's just the CFP has started to put their foot down on this area, which obviously we support, but makes it a little harder to be a broker or a captive agent and hold the CFP. But So what was life as a broker? Because again, we hear about it, but it's not a job I ever had. So, what does a broker do exactly?
It's funny because in some ways it really wasn't that different. And I will say I was in a good office where pretty much all the brokers in my office were at least fee-based. They were all putting their clients in separately managed accounts and things like that. So as close as they could be to an ethical or whatever you want to say version of doing all that, they were doing that. And so that was good. And they were fairly planning focused. We did a lot of plans for people there. So it wasn't necessarily your stereotypical office. And the other thing is a lot of them were big producers. There's a lot of money in Boulder. So a number of those brokers were $1 million producers. And, so they had no problem giving me their little $300,000 accounts and things like that. So it didn't really feel as bad as what a lot of people say. And one thing I'll tell people when I talk about fiduciary and how that works is I just say, I was the same person at Merrill Lynch that I am now. And I said, I tried to do the best thing I could for clients there. And I tried to do the best thing I can for clients now. I said, for me, one of the big differences is I said, when I worked at Merrill Lynch, even I didn't understand how I got paid because it was like this 30, 40 page compensation structure. And I didn't understand it. But I certainly couldn't explain it to clients.
Oh, that's such a good point.
Yeah.
So how did you get paid? Did you ever figure it out?
So when I was there, I was part of the training program and I had a salary. So it was something to do with salary and bonuses. And I just got paid. And honestly, I left around the time I graduated. Well, I guess I was started having my kids. And so the thing too is you have a kid and they suspend everything and they don't count any of the rules against you and you've got your paid maternity leave and then you come back and it starts again. And so I had both of my kids when I was technically still in the training program. And then I guess shortly after that, right about the time I was coming out of the training program, then my husband had gotten a better job and I had the opportunity to actually work part-time. So I ended up giving all of my clients to one of the other brokers in the office. And I went to work for him part-time as what they called an investment associate, which was really just a glorified assistant. But it allowed me to have a stable income. It wasn't very much. I think after paying for daycare, I made something like $100 a month. But it allowed me to stay home with my kids part-time, to work part-time, keep a foot in the industry, keep my CFP going, and it also got me out of the house a few days a week, which I kind of liked because I didn't want to be a stay-at-home mom. So it was really great. And then when I was ready to go back to work again, I ended up leaving Merrill Lynch and kind of bounced around a little while for a couple of years. But yeah, I did leave when I was ready to go back to work again.
Yeah. And I guess with Merrill, none of the clients were yours. Like I said, you could just sort of give them to someone else and go work for them. Were you compensated at all for the fact that you basically handed someone else revenue?
No, I just took salary from him and that was it. So, I guess my revenues helped pay my salary.
Right. That's fair. Okay. So you bounced around a little bit. Were you sort of searching for, a certain type of job or a certain type of company or position, or just fell into a couple opportunities that just didn't work out?
Yeah, it was, part of it was looking for a right fit and then the right work-life balance. So I worked for State Farm for a little while, part-time, when they were just starting up their investment program. I went and worked in one of the State Farm agents' offices and, I helped them sell mutual funds and the life insurance and that kind of thing. And that was okay. It was kind of interesting and fun and, working more with middle class people, which was kind of neat. But then State Farm ran into some issues with their licensing and it became pretty clear that they were going to basically have to fold their program.
Oh, interesting.
And so at the same time, MetLife, of all places, there was a company called MetLife Resources that was advertising for what they called a case consultant. And basically what it was kind of a home office job where you would write plans for other advisors all around the country. And that was my job. And so I took that. And that's when I went back to work full time. My youngest was 2 years old at that point, and I was ready to go back to work. And it was a great job because the main software we worked in was NaviPlan. And they actually sent me to Canada twice to train with them. We had the early version of eMoney, and then we had this program. I don't know if you've ever heard of Profiles, Lumen Profiles back in the day.
I think so.
Yeah. But really what it was is they had their advisors all around the country who would talk to clients about planning and sell planning, and they would collect all the data, send it to me. and I could work from home or work in the home office. And all I did all day long was write plans. So it was really, really fun and a great learning experience.
Yeah, a great way to see, how the sausage is made. If you're literally the one pumping out all the plans.
Mm-hmm.
As I say, like how was that process? I mean, do you feel like you can write an appropriate financial plan for someone that you haven't actually met with if you're just pulling in all the data? Or I guess, do you feel like those were good financial plans?
Yeah, actually, I thought they were pretty good. I mean, for the most part. And I could go back to the rep and say, hey, I don't understand this, or I don't understand that. Can you go back and ask your clients? And they were usually pretty cooperative. So, and I really felt like they were doing pretty good planning. I mean, yes, it was an insurance company. I mean, it was a division of MetLife, but I thought they were doing decent planning too. It wasn't just all, let's turn this into an opportunity to sell life insurance to you. So it was good stuff.
That's good to hear. We demonize insurance companies sometimes, but there are really good people that work at insurance companies. So we shouldn't. But they are in a position actually to help a lot of people if the compensation structure was a little cleaner and incentivized planning over using planning to sell insurance. I think they could have such a wonderful impact with all the clients that they work with, because they work with so many clients. I mean, folks will come from that world and like, oh yeah, I have, 2,000 clients or whatever. And it's like, oh man, that's awesome. Like you can have 2,000 person impact.
Yep. Well, and this division worked primarily, they were big on the 403B side. So they worked with a lot of hospitals, so doctors and teachers and that kind of thing. And, again, you can hate or love the 403B area, but, again, I thought for what they were doing a pretty good job in that area.
Sure. So I guess what was the next step then?
Well, so then what happened is Chase decided to buy parts of MetLife. And in the end, they were folding MetLife. And so they offered to move me to New Jersey. And I basically told them, unless I could find my husband some world-class mountain biking in New Jersey, I wasn't going to be moving to New Jersey. So I had to leave. And so I started looking for another job. And then it was funny because what they did is they ended up coming back and offering to let me go to work for the parent company, MetLife, and just work from home as much as I wanted. And so I was doing that, but at the same time, I was starting to look for other jobs. And it was interesting doing that, but I had to travel a lot. So I think I traveled like 3 out of 4 weeks, a couple months in a row. And with little kids at home, that just wasn't
that'll burn
working.
you out quick.
Yeah. So one of the jobs that I had looked at was to go back to work for a wealth management firm called Janicek and Associates. And they were all the way on the other side of Denver, but it was a great opportunity. It was going back as an advisor. They literally doubled my salary from what I was making at MetLife. So it was one of those like, yep, I'm going to take this job. And I went there, and that was a really interesting place too. I mean, Joseph Janicek is an amazing guy and was running a really, really cool firm, big on strategic coach. And so I got to learn a lot about strategic coach when I worked there. And he was really working with business owners, entrepreneurs, executives, so people who were making money. And that was really interesting and really fun and I worked with him for 1.5 years, and it was a great experience. I learned so much. My biggest problem is he was all the way on the other side of Denver, and it was about an 1.5 hour commute each way. And yeah, and there's a big difference kind of in the climate between the Boulder side of Denver and the Colorado Springs southern side of Denver. And I am a much more Boulder person. And after originally I took the job thinking we would move to the south side of Denver. And after a year or so working down there, I thought, nope, I can't live down here. This isn't my people. So literally there was one day and I just said, I have to get another job. And I arranged 3 job interviews in Boulder, and I called in sick that day and I said, by the end of the day, I need to have a job offer for another company. And thankfully it worked out and I did get a job offer. So I left pretty abruptly in the end and went to work for a firm called the Wealth Conservancy in Boulder.
So, commute time has one of the highest correlations for unhappiness of anything in our lives. No matter what it is, commute, it just kills people. I mean, and I know some folks and will tell me like, oh no, I love driving. 1.5 hours every day each way. Like it just grinds on you. They're just, it just does. So.
Oh yeah. Well, and again, it's time away. I had little kids, so that's 3 hours a day away from my kids. And I think I put 45,000 miles on my car in 1 year. I just couldn't do it.
So made the move to another firm. How was life there?
That was great. I really, really liked that firm. And I was there for 7 years, basically until I opened this firm. And at the Wealth Conservancy, it's owned by a woman, Myra Salzer, and she was great. And I learned, again, just so much from her. At the Wealth Conservancy, we specialized in inheritors. And one of our criteria was if you have to work for a living, you're probably not appropriate for our firm. So we were dealing with, big inheritors. I mean, typically 5 million or more in assets. So it was a really different environment. Lots of coaching and just kind of teaching these people about life. So, definitely there was a money component to it, but there was a huge behavioral component to our work. And that was really fun.
Yeah. It's interesting because a lot of people, it really frustrates me, but people say, oh, I got this person that won the lottery or they got an inheritance. They're just spending all their money. So, not a good client. Let's just fire this client. And it's like, no, we've just become very accustomed to working with people that already had the financial habits in place to be successful. And many times inheritors do not because they've never had money and they're all of a sudden given a bunch of money and they've spent their whole life maybe not being used to either having it or, having to manage it. And all of a sudden you give someone a bunch of money and it's like, okay, there's a ton of coaching that can be done there. So I guess, how did you get in with those clients? Was it just, word of mouth from attorneys, or did y'all is there a way to market to inheritors in a non-creepy way?
Yeah. So Myra was the rainmaker. And, I was one of these people who was basically managing all the clients behind the scenes, but she was pretty well networked on a national basis. Our clients were not just in Boulder. They were all around the country. And she just, her marketing and networking, and she paid a lot of money for PR firms, and she would find these people. And, and we would go out and visit them. She was funny. We would go and visit our clients. We would stay in their houses. We would tour. I mean, we actually walked through their closets, and it was really uncomfortable for me for a long time. But you develop a relationship with those clients then that other advisors would just never cross those boundaries. And so they just would never develop that kind of close relationship with those clients that we would. And so it was a really different approach, but it really worked and it was great.
That's crazy. That is a new one.
Yeah, it's hard on me because I am definitely a little bit more of that introvert. And at the end of the day, I need to go home and just be by myself. And to have to sit in a client's house 24 hours a day for 3 or 4 days in a row was always tough for me. And I was exhausted when I'd come home from those trips, but I definitely saw the value in doing it too.
Very cool. I mean, they say the best way to see how a client lives and see who they really are is be in the home.
Yeah.
So it's actually one of the advantages, I think, in this day and age of being able to meet virtually with a client, because I feel like you can get inside of someone's home without literally having to go to their home, but much less actually sleep in their home, which would be horribly uncomfortable. There is no way. So you said you were there for 7 years. So obviously had a good run there, and it sounds like you learned a lot. But ultimately, what led you to making the decision to ultimately leave and start your own firm?
Yeah. So, I really thought I would be there for the rest of my career. And what happened is we had an investment guy there who is a great guy, and I'm still friends with him. His name was Steve, but he was really into gold. And he had been buying gold for the clients from before I started there all the way through. And, and in 2007, 2008, when the markets really tanked, we looked brilliant because our clients did amazing. But he was the one guy in charge of investments, and he also never got out of gold. And in the end, our portfolios were heavily, heavily invested in gold, to the point where he would go and visit clients and they would buy gold coins and he would install safes in their houses. And he would tell people, if you're traveling overseas, get a bank somewhere overseas and put gold coins in the safe deposit box overseas. Yeah, really, really into that. And so what happened was he had the big gold investments, and then the rest of the client portfolios were also very defensive oriented and very little equity exposure, almost no bond exposure. And so in the years after 2007, 2008, when the market started to recover, I think the markets were up 65% in 2 years and our clients were down 35%. And that was a real awakening for me, just in terms of philosophy and how you approach clients, because at the end of the day, I felt like he did unrecoverable damage to our clients. And, and these are people who had never worked for a living. So they didn't really have the ability to go out and earn money to recover. And it was one of those things you're going to spend the rest of your career trying to make this money back to clients, and you're not going to be able to do it.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy to be in a defensive position with no bonds even. I mean
Yeah.
it's just a
Yeah.
bunch of gold and real estate, or I mean what else do you
Gold
put
and a
in
lot
it?
of the long short funds,
A lot of the alts.
go anywhere. Yeah, a lot of that kind of stuff. So, yeah, and it's one thing to do that. I mean, he really, to this day, he really believes in it. He buys into that story 100%. And I do admire him for his convictions in that area. My biggest problem was that you never put any guardrails on it. You never got out when you were doing well. You never really looked at, it's kind of all that confirmation bias stuff. You never really looked at what if I'm wrong. And, I tell people all the time, it's one thing to make a mistake, but how you handle yourself after you make a mistake says everything about who you are. And, I got in this position where I really wanted to start diversifying clients. And so it was said, can we take even 10% or 25% of this portfolio every year and start getting back into some diversified, regular types of investments? And I started doing that with the clients I was managing, but, he was really into his story and, good or bad. I mean, Myra really was very loyal to him and we had multiple conversations about it. But, at the end of the day, it was a philosophical difference. I really wanted to get clients going that way. The other thing I noticed all the time is, well, what about taking care of the whole net worth? So if these clients had real estate holdings or other things, they would have been a lot more protected. And so, I am one of these advisors who doesn't just look at the portfolio. I like to look at everything that the client is doing and diversification across the net worth and not just inside of a portfolio.
I think it's a really good point for folks that are job seeking, particularly our younger folks getting that first job or two. People ask, how do I know if it's a good fit? And this was actually one of my questions. I graduated my undergrad in 2009 and then grad, 2011 because I couldn't find a job. But that was one of my interview questions. Basically, I guess in 2010 was, what did you do in '08? And I remember finding this amazing firm that was this wonderful cultural fit. They did planning the right way, great opportunity and all that. And they told me they went to cash. And I was like, nope.
Wow.
And it's hard when you're 22 or 23 years old. You look like an arrogant jerk when you basically turn a firm down because you don't agree with their investment philosophy because you don't know jack. But if you do have to find a place that is a good fit, and that's one of those things most advisors probably don't even think to ask when they're getting a job. They just say like, okay, we'll let the investment committee handle it. But ultimately, you're the one that has to tell the client what happened. So even though they're doing the work, you got to understand it and agree with it. And if you were just like, I love gold and, long, short alt funds, like, okay, you can tell that story and you can explain it. But if you don't agree with it, it's hard to sell something you disagree with.
Yeah. Yeah. And it got to that point where it was just, the clients knew that I didn't feel the same way about it as the owners of the firm. And, to give Myra and Steve credit too, they did let me start, I brought in dimensional funds and I did start diversifying the clients that I was working with. And they were okay with that. I mean, they didn't love it. And we had conversations probably over the course of a year or two about how are we handling this? What are we doing? And, they were letting me do it, but there's a difference between letting you do it and really buying into it. And finally, I just decided, this is a philosophical difference. I need to be doing something different. And then I hit the point where it was just, I can go work for another firm, but I've been doing it long enough that I knew how I wanted to do things. And I finally just hit the point and I said, I needed to do my own firm. And I was trying to figure it out. And then all of a sudden I read one of the posts from either you or Michael. And it's like, hey, there's this group out there and they kind of give you a template for how to get started. That sounds really good.
That is awesome. It's so funny how people find their way to starting a firm. I mean, one way or the other, much less, the XY Planning Network and just how it happens. And sometimes it's just a random quote mentioned in the investment news or wealth management magazine or something. And like, what is this thing? So I was going to ask, why start a firm then? But it sounds like you had the experience, you had the education, you had the credentials. I mean, it sounds like your kids were a little older then, maybe you had some savings. So, you were actually in a position where it made sense for you.
Yeah. And I still needed permission. Financially, I was really worried about it because I always made a lot more money than my husband. And I was definitely the breadwinner and I was really worried about it. And we actually went and met with our CPA, and our CPA was the one who said, but you could do this and you could do that because, I had my Roth 401k and it was one of those like, I'll never touch that money. And then it was like, you know what, I could actually take out the Roth portion. And that's what I did to start my business. And we had a bunch of home equity and, I was always like, that's off limits. And it's like, oh, well, wait a minute, we could do a home equity loan and that can help cover any cash shortfall for a year or two. And but it took talking to somebody else and them telling me, Raquel, you could do this and you could do that, to finally essentially give me the permission to go ahead and take that risk and do it. So
the financial planners that are currently driving just slammed on their brakes. What do you mean retirement funds and your home equity?
Yeah, I did.
Welcome to entrepreneurship, right?
Yep.
These are the decisions that you make. How did you handle the loss of income? I mean, because that's the bigger, it's not the business expenses, right? It's always the personal side. So, and I'm just making an assumption here. There's lifestyle creep. The older you get, the more money you're making, the more money you spend. So, it's a much bigger adjustment than someone who's 25 and been living on their own in a studio apartment for the last 3 years after college, right? So, was that a big lifestyle adjustment, or did y'all just make up for the loss of income with savings or home equity, Roth, that sort of thing?
I'd love to say that we were really great at adjusting our lifestyle, and we weren't. So we had a home equity line, and at this point, my kids were teenagers, and it's really hard to tell your teenagers, like, I'm sorry, but I'm not buying you Nike anymore. We're gonna have to shop at Walmart, and that kind of stuff. And I had a kid who plays club basketball, and that costs thousands of dollars a year, and to tell them no, I mean, I'll tell you, it teaches you a lot about how you deal with your clients, because it really is hard to say no sometimes. And we knew it was only a temporary loss of income too. So, I would have liked to have handled it differently, and I would have liked to have been able to really cut back. And, we did some, but not as much as I'd like. You know what? We did. We funded it the way we had to do it. And, I'm glad we did it, and we'll be fine. And, it definitely brought up some money issues. And my husband and I told you before the call, we're getting divorced, but it's okay. And it brought out issues that needed to be brought out, I guess.
Yeah, it did. Was spending money that you had saved, was that a big trigger for a lot of money discussions?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My husband and I would say that we were competitive spenders. So we definitely had some different priorities, and that came out a lot in our marriage. And, being a financial planner, you always feel like you have to be able to deal with it. And finally, I hit a point where it's like, you know what? We're just different people, and this part of our lives is never going to work.
Competitive spender. I'm not familiar with that term.
It's just that, for example, we would talk about going on vacation, and I would want to go to Costa Rica and he would want to go to Hawaii, and we could never agree. And so we'd just never do anything, and our money would get spent somewhere else.
I see.
He really likes to drink. He loves to microbrew beer. I like to buy clothes, and it was just one of those things when you can never agree on your priorities, and you each do your own thing. And, so I had a lot of problems with that.
So were y'all on the same page with you launching a firm? Because like I said, that if there's some marital, troubles happening, you're taking a big hit to income, you're spending out of savings. Were y'all on the same page at first, or were you on different pages?
Yes and no. I was worried, and, I had toyed with starting my own firm several times in the past, and I never did because I was worried about what would happen to our marriage. Opening your own firm is a lot of work, and I just wasn't sure that he was up for that. And so I thought about it many times, and financially, I just knew if my loss of income could be really hard on us. And so I always delayed. And then I did finally just hit a point where I thought, when I'm 80 years old and I look back on my life, am I going to regret the fact that I didn't try? And the answer was very clearly yes. And so then I knew I had to do it. And I gave myself a deadline. It's I had 3 years to get it done. And sure enough, within 6 months, I was opening my own firm.
Nothing like getting started and giving yourself a deadline.
Yeah. But we actually had a conversation. Before I started my firm, we talked about it because he's been around the business enough to know that, you stick into it. You stick with it long enough and you do really well. And so I think he saw the dollar signs associated with being a successful advisor. And, and I did sit him down and we talked, and I said, are you really up for this? Do you understand that this is going to be 5 years of really hard work? And, I'm not sure that we're going to make it. And he was like, yeah, no, this is going to be great. And sure enough, about a year into it, we started having some pretty major problems.
So what ultimately, do you mind if I ask just sort of what were those issues? Were they connected? I'm always curious to know if it's connected with the business. Did the business cause the problems, or the business just unearthed problems that, we didn't have to talk about because we were all happy and making good money, so it didn't matter?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of both. it's just a lot of work. And so, I'm not around as much. And so he definitely had to do more of the taking the kids around different places, cooking dinner. That was a big one. He had to cook dinner a lot. I hate cooking anyway, so it was my excuse to not have to cook very much. He had to pick up a lot more of the just cleaning and doing laundry and, that kind of stuff, the regular chores. And I think he was fine with that. What he wasn't prepared for is spending a lot of time alone. And, so his big things are bike racing, and he loves to drink beer. And it was one of those things where I kept saying, you've got to get some other hobbies. You've got to find some other things to do. Our kids are getting older. They don't need your attention all the time. And I think he really struggled with that. He was left on his own a lot, and that's really hard. And I don't blame him for that. He's a good guy, but yeah.
It's I appreciate you sharing that. I know that many times on this show, we talk about like your significant other has to be on board for you to be successful. and it sounds like he was on board on the front end. But like I said, it is a hard journey. And if you're not both in for it, either it's not going to work, or something's not going to work.
Yeah.
And we do see a lot, and I don't have any statistics on this, but I do think we see an increased divorce rate in sort of that first 3 to 5 years of business.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's just, like I said, if it's the starting the business part is really hard and that takes a toll on the marriage, if it's the financial side, or if, in my case, I felt like it was a lot of sort of finally accepting who I was as a person, which was a very different person than I was as an employee. And I think I changed as a person, which is obviously really hard, especially when you've been in a relationship for a long time. So yeah, it is tough, but I appreciate you being willing to share that.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's funny because I from my side, then it was the emotional support. Is he was going through the motions of doing all the stuff, but he was very resentful and didn't like it. And so then I was always feeling guilty. And so that piece was a big deal to me. And it's funny because I would listen to all these XY podcasts, and I'd listen to these people talking about, oh gosh, my spouse has been such a support for me and it's been so wonderful. And all I could think was, well, I'm doing well in spite of my spouse, not because of my spouse.
No, which is it's a testament to the drive that you have for this. Because I do think it's an extra hurdle and an extra obstacle that you've got to work with. So I guess changing gears just a little bit, talk to me about sort of the first launching of the firm. So you said it's been 4.5 years now?
3.5.
3.5 years now. So you made the decision. It took you about 6 months. Were you able to bring clients with you? Sort of what did that first initial launch look like?
No, so I did not bring clients. Well, I brought one $300,000 client with me, and that's it. And that was by design. My old firm was obviously going through some tough times, and I could have taken clients, but I didn't want to do that to them. I mean, there's no way I would have had the experience to be able to launch my own firm if it weren't for the years I spent there. And so I didn't want to do any damage to my old firm. And honestly, I decided they would be better as a referral source than burning bridges because, they only took really big clients. I thought, gosh, if they just throw their castaways to me, it would be a good business decision for me. So I brought one client and I basically started from scratch, but I was very strategic about how I opened my firm. So, I did enough research to know that I'm, again, right outside of Boulder. There's a ton of money in Boulder. The Denver area is just growing tremendously. It's high tech, high income. I'm in a town that, I think when we first moved here in 2004, it was like 10 or 15,000 people. It's over 20,000 now. It's supposed to be $60,000 or 60,000 people in the next 20 years. So, huge growth. And it's kind of got to be one of those things where was waiting for my town to become successful or big enough that I thought it could support a firm. And, the other thing is a lot of the fee-only firms, in Boulder will only take $1 million and bigger clients. So there weren't any other fee-only planners kind of in that East Boulder County area. And I thought, well, there's a real opportunity here to be able to do this, and working with younger people, at least, the XY version could work for me. And so I kind of got to this point where I thought, well, it'd be really hard to fail. I mean, it's kind of everything is set up for success if I do this right. And, it helped that I had my CFP for a long time. I had a lot of experience. One thing that I did do is I got office space from the very beginning. I happened to find a office inside of another company for $200 a month, and they let me use the conference room. Yeah. And they said, you can use our conference room as much as you want. And so I did that. And then after a year, actually, the back of the building opened. So I have the whole back of a building now, and it's been great. And that way I'm professional, and my sign is on the front of the building, and I'm right next door to a really nice farm to table restaurant. So people see me all the time. And I'm across the street from the post office. So I've got a lot of street visibility. I have a great website guy and really good SEO people. So, I feel like I've never really had to work too hard at the marketing, but I've been really lucky, and I have plenty of prospects. So
yeah, where are those coming from? I mean, are you getting any referrals from your old firm with some of those, quote unquote cast-offs, the ones that don't meet their minimum?
Yeah, I've gotten, it's kind of come from everywhere. So I have gotten some clients from them. I think just some of the visibility and exposure. I am involved in the community from the extent of, I have kids. So my kids play sports. I'm involved in their sports. Yes, I go to their school events. I'm very involved on a board. So, my idea of charity is, rather than being involved in a bunch of different charitable organizations, I do a whole lot with one. And so I'm very involved on a mental health organization, and it's a big one. I mean, our budget is $40 million. We have 500 employees. So it's a big organization. Yeah. But I've been doing that for 7 or 8 years, and I've been heavily involved in the board, and people see that level of commitment. And so I've gotten, retired executives have come to me once they retired, and other board members are, pretty connected people in the community. So I've gotten some business from it, but really it's been about me just trying to give and to learn. And I've gotten so much more out of it than I've given, but that's helped. I'm 49, so I'm a little bit older, and most of my friends are older, but they know what I do. So when they change jobs or something like that happens, they come to me. And then there's just a ton of people find me through the internet, whether it's Feely Network and the NAPA website, just regular Google searches, but a lot of people find me through the internet.
Yeah, it's crazy how that works sometimes. And like I said, just it's the shotgun effect where, you do a lot of different things and each of them can reap a small benefit. You don't have to put all your eggs in one marketing basket, if you will.
Yeah.
And you don't go get involved on a board to get clients. However, if you are passionate about, that particular cause and you get heavily involved, you may find that you benefit from it, particularly as a financial advisor.
Right.
So the clients really have sort of come from everywhere. It doesn't sound like there's any like predominant place other than, of course, the internet, which is hard to define where they're actually coming from there, but it doesn't sound like there's any, single one that's sending a lot of new business your way.
No. And I will say, I've kind of resisted the niche marketing a little bit. I'm sorry.
Here we go. No.
But at the same time, I do have some commonalities among my clients. So there's definitely a big local, kind of this whole North Denver metro area is an area of mine. Another thing I've kind of figured out, and it's hard to explain, but I say that I tend to get a lot of clients who just aren't served well by traditional wealth management. So a fair number of inheritor clients. I have some gay and lesbian clients. I would say most of the people who come to me have some money. And it's more that they're just uneducated. They don't really know what to do with it. They want somebody who will be supportive and be a partner. Kind of that whole coaching piece comes into it. My clients tend to be older. So I would say, older from XY standpoint, I would say 45 or 50 through 65. I'll tell you, the whole millennials and student loans and all that, that's just not an area I really want to get involved with. So I tend to not attract as many of the younger clients, which is fine. It's not what I do well. So no, I don't have a specific niche, but yet I find that a lot of my rental properties is another big one. I actually love rental properties. So a huge number of my clients have rental properties. Again, the inheritances, there are a lot of commonalities among my clients.
So you mentioned you enjoy real estate. Are you finding that the client and sort of the type of client that you're working with is evolving a bit and focusing, whether it be certain levels of complexity or income or something like that? So it may not be a niche in terms of a profession, but sort of this common thread that all your clients sort of fall into?
Yeah. A lot of my clients have inheritances, not necessarily huge inheritances, but a lot of them have some of that. A big portion of my clients do have rental properties. I really like rental properties. I think they're a great inflation-adjusted source of income, especially in retirement, and can be nice for a pension replacement. So, so many advisors out there really don't like rental properties, and I'm a fan. So I think I get some of those clients. So those are some of the commonalities I see in my clients. It's not specifically a niche, but I do have a number of clients who have a lot of things in common.
Yeah, and those are areas of specialization, right? I mean, rental properties are really complex. The first time you have to build an Excel spreadsheet to really show a cap rate on a rental property, it's a whole new ballgame.
Yeah.
Nice thing, once you build it once, you can reuse it. But being able to have the conversation with a client about a non-traditional investment, whether that's real estate or gold or starting a business, I find that a lot of advisors are not equipped to have those conversations. Because, sometimes financially, it's not always the best decision. I mean, you think about starting a business, right? If you had sat down with a financial advisor and you said, here's the plan. I'm going to give up a high paying job and I'm going to make no money for the next 3 years. I'm going to take all my money out of savings and I'm going to dump it into this business and hopefully it works. Like, no, right? Like I will run the numbers to show you why you were stupid. And yet, it's not just about the dollars. It's also about what drives you and what fulfills you. And some people just really like real estate. They like to be able to go kick their investment. Like they want to go touch what they own. They don't want a fractional share of a stock of a company they've never heard of. And so, and sometimes we have to talk people out of real estate. Obviously, you don't want to be only in real estate, but that is a skill set and an expertise to be able to have to talk intelligently with your clients about getting a house that the rent barely pays the mortgage. That ain't a good investment. That's the way that works. So,
I try to keep it really big picture. And I talk to my clients, I use an analogy, I call it the legs in the stool. And I say, our parents typically had a pension, Social Security, and hopefully some savings or investments. And so that's 3 legs and that's a stool and that's fairly secure. And I said, if they happen to have had a rental property or business, well, then they've got 4 legs and that's a table and that's really secure. But people of our generation, they have Social Security and a portfolio, and that's it. And that's 2 legs, and that's not secure. So what are we going to do to create a 3rd leg? And it can be a rental property. It can be a business. And obviously, if you're going to do rental properties, you've got to be somebody who can handle having rental properties, or you've got to have the financial wherewithal to hire a property manager and build that in. But if not that, then if you're one of my older clients, we'll talk about, well, maybe an income annuity is the right thing. And I haven't done one yet. I don't have enough of those older clients, but it's really, what are you going to do to create that other income stream or that other leg? And again, it's just back to diversifying your net worth. I don't believe in just having a portfolio. I don't.
So talk to me about sort of your service model when you're working with clients. One, I guess, how do you set your fees when you're working with these clients?
So I really break it down into 3 different offerings. I tell people I do financial planning, I do investments, and it's really whatever works for you. So I think my company tagline is financial planning and investments to fit your needs. And my 3 real offerings are, I do have a project plan that I'll do for people. And, typically those are around $2,000, but I have a project plan that's a limited scope engagement for kind of those do-it-yourself clients. And then I have my annual planning model, which is really the XYPN monthly retainer model. And I tell people this is really geared towards people who need financial planning help. They might need some investment guidance, but say all your money is tied up in a company 401k or something like that. So you don't have money to bring to me to manage for you. And then I do have the 3rd offering. I call it full service, but that's basically your traditional wealth management. And I have gone round and round about how I price and what I do. And, for the full service, I finally just went back to an AUM model with a minimum fee, because it got to be too hard to explain flat fees. I love the people who can do that, but for me, it was too hard to explain. I lost some decent sized clients. I had a client that came to me once with like $1.5 million. She was a mother of a guy I grew up with. So I gave her a great deal and I said, I'll do this for you for $7,000 a year. And her eyes kind of bugged out and she was like, no way. And I know if I would have said, I'll do it for 50 basis points, she would have been fine.
And you would have made more money.
Yeah. And so in the end, I was like, okay, I'm just going to do AUM pricing. I would love to be able to do it the other way, but I'm not the person to fight that battle. So
yeah, it is admittedly, when you say $1, it does feel different than when you say a percentage, right? And that's why it's easier to sell percentages. And we are seeing, plenty of advisors are doing monthly retainers or they're doing, flat fee for smaller clients. And as those clients get bigger, as they talk to bigger clients, we start to see the AUM based billing because again, does dollars matter? And it's a harder sell when the same way basis points is a lot harder than commissions. It used to just be like, oh, you need this product, here it is. Big company pays me, don't worry about it. So
and one thing I'm doing that's a little bit different is I actually cap my fee at the high end for most clients. I don't advertise that because then if I had somebody who came to me with 15 million, I want to be able to raise my fee. But I do tend to cap my fee on the high end at $10,000 for a lot of people, because I do feel like there's a point where it's hard to justify charging more. And maybe that's imposter syndrome kicking in, and maybe eventually I'll change that. But right now, I tend to do that.
Yeah, and it'll be the first time you work with a client that you're like, I'm providing way more than $10,000 of value, and, which you absolutely can. I do agree it's not a one-to-one relationship. So managing a $2 million portfolio is not twice as hard as a $1 million portfolio.
Yeah, well, and honestly, the $2 million clients for me seem easier than some of the smaller clients, because a lot of those, you know what, the backdoor Roths just don't matter as much when you have $2 million in your portfolio.
Yeah.
So, and that's where I've spent most of my time as a planner, is working with the higher end clients. So sometimes they're actually easier for me than working with some of the clients who are just starting out and that kind of thing.
It's a different conversation, right? When you work with a high net worth client that's saved for years and they have several $1 million, that's a different conversation than someone who's like, I want to develop the habits to become wealthy.
Right.
Because forming habits is a lot tougher than working with someone that already has the habits. And I think it's super valuable work, but to your point, it is a little different, and why a lot of advisors sort of pick one or the other, because it can be hard to serve. Some of us struggle to serve a wide range of clients because it is so much context switching between the two.
Right.
So what do you see for the future? I mean, you're growing, making good money. Obviously, some life changes happening. Kids are getting are getting old enough that you have a little more flexibility. So what are you thinking? I mean, does the business grow and become, 10, 15, 20 advisors, or are you having fun and going to take off and start traveling the world?
No, I definitely want to grow my firm. I think I am actually best at running a firm. And one thing I've noticed is that I have less and less interest in the day-to-day planning all the time. So my goal is to get somebody in, as soon as possible. And obviously the finances have to work, but to have somebody come in as more that junior planner who does a lot of the planning and then kind of grow from there. And I definitely have a vision for what I want a firm to look like someday. And I would love to have a firm with a number. I think I settle on the idea of 8 to 10 people, but I'd love to have a bigger firm and, not the silos, but the one big firm. I love the idea of having everybody be an equity owner. I think that's just a great model. And I have no desire to be kind of the queen sitting on top of everybody else. I want to share. And I just feel like a firm is so much better when you have multiple advisors and multiple viewpoints, and you can do much better work for clients. So, that's my goal. I really do want to grow and have a fairly substantial firm.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's a big decision that, we had Accelerate here, 2 weeks ago now, I guess, at the time of this recording. And that was one of the big pieces that we ended up sort of looping back around to, because we started in on hiring, because that was the theme of several of the sessions. About partway through, we sort of circled back around, like, what do you really want to build? And we were able to show, we had JD Bruce here from Abacus, because they have like 60 employees. And we have others that are, have smaller firms, and to be able to have the conversation of what is life actually like when you run a 60-person company? What is life like when you run an 8-person company? And what is it like as a solo? And, it matters, because many times we can build the wrong business. We can build a business. We can build a big business when we really just want to be solo and stay flexible, or vice versa. And sometimes it's life stage dependent. When you got small kids, you may not be gung ho about building an enterprise. And when they get a little older, you dive in and build it a little faster. And that's okay. You can have that flexibility.
Yep, I agree. When my kids were little, I couldn't imagine being an advisor, just doing it on my own. And I always said, I just want to be a salary planner working for somebody else. And now I've hit this point, and I love being a firm owner, and I never thought I would really do it. So it's kind of surprising that I've ended up here. I don't think I'm a natural born entrepreneur, but I do enjoy it. And, I have no interest in just having a lifestyle practice. I really like running a firm.
So for anyone out there who loves mountain biking and skiing in Colorado, you can hit up Raquel.
Inundated.
You will. I should have warned you about anytime someone on this show says they're hiring. I don't like to tell people beforehand that 3,000 people are going to listen to this. So a few of those are going to email you.
I just hired a paraplanner this week. So
do not email her then. So do you have any sort of big projects, whether it be pricing changes, service model changes, expanding the office, like anything big coming over those next 12 to 18 months?
Oh boy. I've worked really hard on some of trying to define my ideal client. And, I keep listening to what you guys say about niche, and I keep trying to get myself to go there, and I'm just not very good at it. But I think that's a part of it for me, is really putting some numbers to paper about what I want my firm to be like. And, one of the things I've thought about is hiring a younger advisor who might want to work with more of the millennial clients, because that's not my area. And that might be a way to grow my firm. So kind of figuring out, do I want to try to fill all the holes, or do I really want to stick to what I'm doing and just hire people to do that? And so that's a big part of my plan, is really trying to get a little bit more of that vision down on paper. I think that's a big part of it. I'm constantly trying to revise how I deliver service and what I'm doing for my clients. Every time I get out of a meeting, I think about, well, what could I have done differently? What could I have done better? How could I be a better planner? I did do all the testing for my enrolled agent earlier this year. So I'm adding tax planning, not necessarily in doing tax returns, but much more significant tax planning than I've done in the past. I don't know how you can do financial planning without doing tax planning anymore.
Yeah, especially with the clients that you're working with, even more so, especially whenever you get up into those higher income brackets, a tax-centric planning process becomes very appropriate.
Yes.
So if anyone out there has a good sales pitch for you on what you should be building and why they should be a part of it, you'll get those emails as well. So
all right, sounds good.
It is an interesting inflection point that you're at, and we see this typically, but generally around that like 125,000 to 200,000 in revenue is sort of that. Until you're at about 75 to 80,000, you're just like, just trying to figure out what in the world is going on and just getting that revenue up. Once you start getting up into the six figures, that's when these conversations start coming up around like, what am I really building? How do I want to build this? And doing it the right way, because, firing people sucks. So hiring someone and then changing your mind about the direction you want to go is never fun. And so I think you're wise to be deliberate about it and take some time, because, sounds like the business is coming in, the prospects are coming in. So growth is not going to be the problem. It's it's what business do you actually want to build?
Yep. I agree. Thanks.
Well, as we're sort of coming to a close, I'll ask you the final question. And that is, if you could go back to your younger self and give yourself one piece of advice, that one thing that you wish you had known then that you know now, what do you think that one piece of advice would be?
For me, I always come back to, don't try to do everything all at once. So, my old firm was so technology averse, and we still used Excel spreadsheets a lot. And so when I finally opened my own firm, I wanted all the latest and greatest technology at everything. And in the end, what I found out is that trying to learn 20 different software programs all at the same time does not work. And, whether it's that or whether it's something else, just focus on trying to do a few things really well and do those, and then add on as you have capacity.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, one of the we need to go back and pull the piece of advice from every single episode, because I bet the most common one is, I should have done it sooner, which is great advice in certain circumstances. But there's other times where it's like, okay, like it is okay to have a plan and to take one step at a time and not try to take 30 steps at one time, because it can be a little overwhelming. I mean, I guess the two pieces that you had in place that a lot of advisors don't is, one, you really knew how you wanted to do planning. And that is a struggle for folks that when they're first going to launch a firm and maybe they've never been a lead advisor. I never had been. I was really trying to figure out like, what's my planning philosophy? How many meetings am I going to have? Like what conversation am I going to have? Like those are really tough things to be dealing with, while also learning that, how to actually run a business along with everything else. So it is one of those things. But well, thank you very much for that piece of advice, as well as just coming on the show and being so transparent and authentic around sort of what you're dealing with and the business and life and all those pieces. I think this will be super helpful for listeners. So thank you so much.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Support for today's episode comes from Ruby Receptionists. Let Ruby help you turn callers into customers. For a special offer, visit callruby.com/XYPN and use promo code XYPN, or better yet, call them at 844-853-7829. Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitsis, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.